Welcome to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brock Barnes Center for Leadership at Covenant College. Leaders in the Arena is about real stories, hard-earned insights, and practical guidance from leaders who are doing the work of leadership in the complex, real-world setting. This series is brought to you by the Brock Barnes Center for Leadership, and our mission is to equip servant leaders to faithfully build institutions and communities in Christ's work of making all things new. We bring that to life through four major capabilities: our Institute for Student Leadership, our Institute for Innovation and Impact, our Institute for Executive Education, and our very important series, the Wisdom and Insight series, which brings me to today's program. We're very excited to have with us our guest, Pat Rayner. He is the Chief Legislative Liaison for the Weapons Division of the United States Air Force. He has been a regular for us a little bit on Leaders in the Arena. So great was his session last time. We invited him back. Pat, welcome. So glad that you are here.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for having me. Happy to be back. Hopefully, I'll offer some insight today that people will take with them and at least make them think about leadership in more depth. But excited to be here. One thing I need to say before I start, I am still an active duty Air Force colonel. So the views that I express today are my views alone. They do not represent the official positions of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, or the United States government. And with that, I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, we are happy that you are here as well. And Pat, one of the first things I wanted to do, because you have an extraordinary career, and many of our participants on our series are both students who are at the college level as well as working professionals. And I thought it might be interesting for them to hear a little bit about your personal leadership journey, like just the stages of your leadership growth and kind of the roles that you've had. If you would share with us a bit about your background.
Sure, no problem. So I'm currently serving in the Pentagon, which is my first time in the Pentagon. And this job as a legislative liaison, my job is to translate with the Department of the Air Force, the Air and Space Force, what their priorities are, what their modernization is, what their acquisition plan is, plans for the future, translate that to Congress. So Congress can understand that. They have civilian oversight over the military. And then on the other side, I have to take what Congress's priorities are, what they think we should be doing to modernize, what they think we should be acquiring, and I have to translate that back to the Department of the Air Force. So it's kind of being the middleman. But right now, I am the chief for a small team of about 10 individuals, and we represent every portfolio in the Air and Space Force. So we have fighters and weapons and bombers and nukes and transport and helicopter and intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, communications, cyber, acquisitions. And I don't know how many that is. I'm probably leaving out one. But there is an action officer, a young field grade officer that is in charge of that portfolio. And then I am their chief. And so my job is to support them in everything they do. And also to provide them with a strategy of what we're trying to get after for a congressional session. And right now we're in the 119th Congress, second session or second year of that, of the 119th. And so my job is to come up with a clear strategy for those group of awesome action officers. But finishing up a 26-year career, my experience has been diverse and varied in the Air Force. And I think when I look back on my career, I'm probably most proud of the different types of leadership challenges and opportunities that I've had. And I'll just list through the things that my military experience for 26 years. Believe it or not, my first job, I was assistant women's tennis coach at the Air Force Academy.
Air Force Academy. I love it.
That was for 6 months before I went to pilot training. I became a C-17 pilot, an instructor and evaluator. That was roughly almost the first half of my career. I actually went back and taught at the Air Force Academy in the history department, which was an incredibly rewarding experience. I worked on the executive staff of the superintendent of the Air Force Academy. Great opportunity to see behind the curtain how an institution like the Air Force Academy is run. I was an operations officer. I was a chief of safety at the wing level. I ran an air show as an air show director. I was a commander 2 times, the squadron level in California, and then at the group level in Germany. I was a NATO officer, spent 3 years living in Italy at an Italian Air Force base, and then finally a legislative liaison. So when I look back on those 26 years and all those different experiences, that's definitely shaped me and how the leader that I am today. It's a culmination of all those experiences. And none of those did I enter saying, I've got this, I know what I'm doing here. All of them were learning on the job, putting myself out there and trying to get better every day. So that's the career snapshot.
That is amazing. I mean, one of the words I used when I opened with this session is your journey, your leadership journey. And what you've just described is amazing. I guess my real question is, did you start when you were 5? Because you couldn't have accomplished all those things. But anyway, it is exciting. And I think, interestingly enough, for leaders, many of us who have, quite a bit of tenure, we receive these opportunities. I think of them as gifts from God, right? Where the doors open and we go into arenas where we may not have initially thought we would be called, but we are called into different arenas. And it sounds like you've had just a huge array of things where you've been able to bring talents and time. One of the things I just want to point out before we go on to our next question, you also said, as their chief, that you're there to serve them. You are there to support them, I think is the word you said. And that is really a big focus for us at Brock Barnes is servant leadership, and even how you describe the magnitude of what you're leading and those that you're supporting. You said, I support them. So that was pretty great. So thanks for being here. I also want to mention to our guests who might be joining live, if you have questions for Pat, you can post those in the chat. And if we have time at the end of today's session, we will cover those questions. So Pat, thanks for giving us the overview of your journey. That's been great. Part of the process when we grow as leaders is getting to that point where you kind of get the awakening that leadership is a responsibility. It's not about a title. And can you talk about that awakening moment or like what happened for you as a leader when you really understand the scope and scale of the responsibility of leading others?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jenny. And I think it's one that you have to be removed in some ways from that moment. I don't think I recognized it when it was happening to me, but definitely after the fact I did. And when I go back, it's to the C-17. So it's a cargo airplane. That's what I selected or was given out of pilot training. And there are three main crew positions on a C-17. You have a pilot, a co-pilot, and a loadmaster. The loadmaster is in the back of the aircraft, and he's in charge of maintaining the security and safety of the cargo that we're bringing, which is our primary mission. So we had paperwork that went with our missions, and they would tell you, here's your takeoff time. Here's your location where you need to go. Here's the specifics of what the cargo is. Here's the priority of your mission. Everything was on that paperwork. And they listed the crew positions by codes. So a pilot would be an A code, a co-pilot a B code, a loadmaster the C code, and then a D would be if we had extra crew members aboard. So as you're working your way up to the C-17 community, you start as a co-pilot, and is experience that you have to gain, and there's milestones that you have to gain, and at the end, your operations officer signs paperwork that's saying you are now good to be the A code. And when you become that A code, your name goes right next to A. But it's not just that. When we had our paperwork go forward for our missions, we call them the crew papers. And on that front page, and this paperwork would be viewed by all the officers in your chain of command. And not only that, the leaders of airlift community, and you're talking, 2, 3, 4-star generals. And they'd say, here's the mission number for the C-17 crew. Here's what they're carrying. And they would list one name on those orders, and it would be the A code. And so that's when they would be Rayner would be up there as the A code. So that's when I transitioned from being a co-pilot who was focused on the tactics of flying, was focused on being along for the ride in some ways. Now, as the A code, it is my responsibility to manage the risk of the crew, to complete the mission successfully, and to make sure that we're doing that to the best of our ability.
Mhm.
My first mission as the A code, we flew over to Germany, and then I had a pilot say, "You're good to go, go by yourself." And so the first mission I got as the A code was one of the hardest missions we had in the C-17 community.
Uh-oh.
We took off from Frankfurt, Germany, did air refueling over the Black Sea, landed in Bagram, Afghanistan, downloaded our cargo, uploaded whatever else they wanted us to bring, took off out of there, went to Ashgabat, landed in Turkmenistan, landed in Ashgabat, got gas there, and then flew back to Frankfurt. So this was the responsibility, and it changed completely because it was no longer, are you good at what you do? It was, can the team be successful?
Hmm.
We had three pilots for that. So we had to manage the sleep schedules. This was a 24-hour day in the airplane.
Hmm.
We never left the airplane. There were some times on the ground that there were downtime, but for the most part, we were flying the entire time. And these were hard missions. This was air refueling, and being 12 feet from another airplane is a challenge. In the dark over the Black Sea, a tactical approach to Bagram. So that's the story of when I knew it was not just about a title,
Hmm.
that it was a responsibility,
Hmm.
and that I had a responsibility to take care of that crew,
Hmm.
complete the mission successfully, and get us back to Germany. No greater sense of accomplishment being able to do that, but when I look back right now, that is the moment for me in my Air Force career. And I was just another thing about this. I was 26 years old,
Oh my goodness.
and I
Wow.
was the oldest person on that crew.
That's a big responsibility for a 26-year-old. As you describe that mission where you had that responsibility, um, when I hear you talking about it, it wasn't just the tactical execution component. The first thing that you listed when you have that A position is you said to manage the risk. And it felt like this responsibility became broader, not just the execution of the mission, but then the safety, the security of the mission, and the people in your care. I don't know if that's where you're going with that, but that's what it illuminated for me when you told that story.
Well, when you become the A code, there are several planning paperwork or documents that you have to do before you step or complete or go to complete a mission like this. You have to talk about your crew. Your resource management is an aviation term that we use. Is your crew up to the task? And you have to sign your name. Then you have to look at, hey, this is what they want you to do. They want you to do air refueling, a tactical approach. They want you to land in Turkmenistan, and they want you to come all the way back here. And you have to say, I looked at all the risk of this mission, which there's also a risk of the enemy where we are flying. And this risk is at a level that we can accept. And
Hmm.
that's the A code signature on that as
Hmm.
well.
That's amazing.
So until you are, yes, you have that pen and you can say yes or no to it, it is a change,
Yeah.
100% change.
And I see it. We do a lot of work with corporations over the years I have. And I do also see that in the private sector that happens. There becomes a time when a manager is really around operational execution. But when they have that pivotal moment where they're managing risk or care for others, the team's safety, the team's effectiveness, the team's livelihood, they become like they are caring for that team in order to execute on the operational responsibilities they've been given. And it seems that when they have that light comes on where they understand the care of the team in addition to the mission ahead, it's where those two things cross that I see that people really understand how to be worthy of followership, how to be a leader.
I think you're right.
Let's go on, and I know there are a million stories. I wish we had hours today, but I'd love for you to share a leadership moment where values and people and outcomes come into play. Because I think often this is the hard part for leaders who are in the arena every day, accountable for making things happen, accountable for their people. And how do they ensure that they're living a set of core values that they're confident of as Christians, as leaders that are got individuals in their care? Talk about this defining moment. Share with me a story.
Okay, I'll go back to another C-17 story. And I think this is probably, I've been an aircraft commander, the A code, for a couple of years. And there was we called them a high vis or high visibility mission. And it was to fly the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, the SACEUR, head of NATO, was an army general at the time, to fly him from Brussels to Kabul, directly to Kabul for meetings with the Afghanistan government. This is when NATO was getting involved in Afghanistan. So that was a big mission, and the SACEUR, that commander, travels with a large party. There were a lot of other people with him. Had to be on time, had to park at the perfect location, and so that was stressful. And as the A code and making sure our team was ready to go, leaving an international airport in Belgium and then landing in a combat zone, and then getting him there on time. We did that, and then he wanted to leave early, and it was just created some problems. But we were able to do that. We were able to do that all successfully, and we got back. And I think we were celebrating in Belgium, just thankful for a successful mission. Wake up the next morning, and we're supposed to get just a return back to the United States mission. That's what we're all counting on. That's where our mindset is completely. And in fact, there's probably people tired, and once you point an air crew, just like you point a horse back towards the barn, that's where they want to go. And I got the crew papers, and the crew papers had a different location on it, and it said basically you need to go directly to Ramstein, Germany, where you're going to pick up 3 wounded servicemen. This is an aeromedical evacuation, and they need to get to the burn center in San Antonio as soon as possible.
Oh my goodness.
So, big change right there. So there's things that has to happen for the C-17. One is we have to refile a different flight plan. We have to check the weather, where we're going to go in Germany at the time. We have to reconfigure the cargo area. So it was ready to go to take the SACEUR, but
Mm-hmm.
now it has to be changed for an aeromedical flight, which comes with all the doctors on board and everything for these 3 patients. Those are all changes that had to happen, but the biggest challenge and the biggest change was we got to change our mindset. From we are going home to now we have to get even more serious, because in the grand scheme of things, this mission that we have today is more important than the one we had yesterday. Um, so we landed in Germany. We picked up the 3 patients. We did not have enough fuel to make it all the way to San Antonio, but we had a tanker that met us over Lake Michigan as we're coasting into the United States. And so we hit a tanker for extra gas, landed in San Antonio International Airport, and they got off the airplane and got to where they needed to be. Um,
How long would a flight be like that, Pat?
so this would actually be shorter than the first one that I talked about.
Mhm.
This is probably about, let's see, probably between 12 and 16 hours, something like that. Still very long.
Yes.
And you have to make sure you're managing the crew.
Mhm.
Just to go back home would have been between 8 to 9 hours from where we were. So it was extra long flying down to Germany and back from Germany. But I think what I learned at that time was, as a leader, what do I owe to this crew? And I owe to them is being flexible enough to give them, hey, here's the new priority, here's the new direction we're going, and getting them to rally around it. I mean, this is also the military. 3 servicemen that need to get to a burn center. That's not going to be very difficult for people to understand the gravity of the situation, but just refocusing everyone and reprioritizing to this. I just see it as a great accomplishment that we were able to do together as a team and to get them to where they needed to be.
I love the fact that you called out mindset. You know, I see this in a lot of organizations where there's a path and we've got a commitment that we've done our job, now we're moving on, but then a change happens. And I do think that often the team looks to the leader to say, how will the leader accept this change? And interestingly enough, leaders are human, right? And they're probably thinking, gosh, I was planning to be home, or maybe there was a loved one event that you were supposed to be at, or whatever. But as you're saying, the mission comes first, the care of those wounded soldiers came first. And so they look to you to see how you're going to absorb the change, that mindset, and then also kind of you model for them how, how to accept a change and how to embrace that change. And it sounds like that was something that you were able to do without even thinking.
I think so. I mean, I'm looking back, I think I was probably 28 years old doing this. And for me, I had great mentors and instructors in the C-17 that I tried to emulate.
Mhm.
And I can't say for certain, but I'm guessing when I got that change, I was thinking about them. I was thinking about how they would lead, what they would do. And their example is the reason why I was successful with it.
Right, right. Yeah, we do what we need to do, right? And that's what leaders are called for. At the Brock Barnes Center, we are focused on servant leadership from a Christian perspective. Talk to me a little bit about your faith and your formation as a leader and how those things come together and how they equip you to be a great leader.
Definitely. When I look at what it means to be a Christian leader or how I define Christian leadership, in some ways, what would make me different from just a leader, being a Christian leader? And there's three things that come to mind for me. Those are eternal perspective. I think that's a foundation of understanding the eternal things, prioritizing the eternal things, which would be people, relationships, and service. That just helps so much having that foundation in the ups and downs of a professional career. It's also provides great resilience for me as a leader, having that eternal perspective. Romans 8 is my go-to scripture. It has been since pilot training and through every challenge that I've had before. I go there, it gives me great confidence. Um, and Gets great perspective for who I am in Christ. And that it's been, it's just always something I go back to in hard times of military service. So I think the eternal perspective is a foundation, and it's also gives me great resilience. The second thing is Jesus's example. And we can look at this in the Gospels and how he taught, but really it's his temperament. And there were different events and challenges that Jesus faced, and he showed grace, he showed kindness, he showed love, but he also showed anger, um, and he also showed grief. So there wasn't one way of dealing with the problem. We have such a great example of that in the life of Jesus, and I'll share a story about that in a second about temperament. Um, but it's also it lets me know that Christian leadership isn't passive; it's active, um, and that's a good thing to know and to give me confidence as a leader. And the last thing I'll say, the third thing is throughout the Old Testament, the Israelites are told to remember and forget not. And actually lasts through the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, we're told to remember. And that is something that's very difficult. And I could call that reflection, and that works in the leadership profession. But that is something that's very difficult to do as a leader. We are fast paced. We want to move quickly. Our agendas are full. We want to focus on the once that decision is made, what's the next problem? Bring on the next one. And we do not take time to reflect. Um, and in my opinion, as a Christian leader, we are called to remember, we are called to reflect. They help us because the successes aren't as high as we think if we look back on our grand scheme of things, our whole life, and our lows aren't actually that low. And so it keeps us more even keeled as leaders. And I find that growth is found in reflection. I mean, growth is found, and you need these experiences, but if you do not stop to think about what they mean to you, What worked? What did not work? What could you have done better? Then uh, you're not going to grow as much as you could. So those are the three things for me as a Christian leader: eternal perspective, Jesus' example, and the command to remember. And I'll talk a little bit about Jesus's temperament and how it has shaped me. I grew up in aviation, grew up in military aviation, and in the Air Force, we have something called the debrief culture,
Mm-hmm.
especially in aviation. And so we would go fly missions in the C-17. And after the mission was over, you would come around a table with your crew at the formation crew. So this could be quite a few people. And the A code of that mission would start off, and we would go through the entire mission in extreme detail from our crew brief, which happens roughly 2.5 hours prior to actually taking off, all the way through every maneuver in the flight, into parking, and then how we got off the airplane. Every detail would be scrutinized. And we did this, we would say rank is off, meaning if you are outranked, doesn't matter, you can say what you want. I think similarly, people say gloves off for this. But it was a harsh debrief culture because we were dealing with the harsh realism of the risks of aviation. And so we needed to be clear with our feedback. No one needed to say it in a softer way. It needed to be clear because of the gravity of the mission that we were doing. So I grew up with that. And that was my go to. Anytime that I did a mission, no matter what, I went to that debrief culture. Let's talk about this. You did this wrong. I did this wrong. Move on. Everybody's happy now.
I love the fact that you've got this reflection and that you also set these ground rules of, leave, everybody's, what did you call it? Where like there's no rank,
No rank.
no rank, so that everybody had a voice, an equal voice in the reflection and the purpose of the reflection around how to be better or how to
Yes.
manage risk and how to ensure that we're safe. I thought that oftentimes in the corporate world, we fail to do that. We're moving so fast that we don't stop to take that moment of reflection many times. And I
Mhm.
love the fact that you set those ground rules to have very open and candid conversation about it.
Right. When I left the aviation community, though, in the Air Force and did a different job, I did realize that that did not play across the board in the Air Force. So there were different communities. In my next job, I was with communications, intelligence, port, maintenance, airfield operations, security forces. And my default worked with some of those communities, but didn't work with everyone. And it does not mean that, oh, Air Force pilots are so tough, they can take harsh criticism and no one else can. It just meant that there was not part of their culture, and so it wasn't something they were used to. So I had to adapt the way that I provided feedback. And I think two things what I think are foundational to Christian leadership of the temperament of Jesus, the example that your style can change, the reason we're giving feedback, all that is the exact same. It's just the way that I'm giving the feedback that has changed. It's different. And then the fact that we're doing feedback, I think, is an important part of Christian leadership is reflection. And like I said before, something that I don't think we provide time to do in our busy schedules as
Mhm.
much as we should.
Right. I mean, when we talk about this reflection and feedback, it brings the concept that comes to my mind is accountability. And Christ was led a life of accountability. He expected accountability from others. In fact, we had an earlier guest a couple of weeks ago, Newt Crenshaw from Young Life, and he
Mhm.
talked about the importance of Christian leaders that we set the tone for accountability. And I think what you're talking about with this activity of reflection, how important that is for people to own it and to really be accountable for their performance and what could be their performance in the next time around, right?
Definitely.
Right. Well, thank you so much. What amazing stories. As always, it's beautiful to have you on this session with us, a series with us. As we kind of begin to wrap up today, do you have any guiding wisdom for our community that you would share around leadership?
Yes, I've got a couple of things. I think one is as a leader, you need to plan. You need to think forward, strategically. I love to plan. I love it. But as a Christian, prayer does not need to be subservient to your planning.
Uh,
And that's a constant reminder for me. I think of it in that math formula or that math. My wife's a mathematician. She'd be mad that I don't know how to exactly say this, but I always think of planning with the greater than, equal to signs, and then prayer. And obviously, it's if prayer's over here, that's greater than planning. So we need to plan, but we need to make sure we go planning through prayer first, and we pray through these and understand that things can change.
mhm.
Um, and I think that's just a great challenge for me. So I'd say, as a Christian leader, prayer over planning. Planning is important, but it's not more important.
Well, fantastic. I really appreciate your call out for prayer. It's powerful. It's something we all need to spend, at least thinking myself, more time doing. And I think it's a great call out for us. Thanks for helping us learn from you today. I've got on my list to go back and check out Romans 8 because I want to
Yes.
know that verse. I was about to pull it up. But thank you, Pat, so much for your stories today and being on Leaders in the Arena.
And Jenny, one last thing is I
Yeah.
love the name of this podcast because leaders must be in the arena. It's cool to talk about leadership. It's cool to be on a podcast about leadership. But for those that are listening that want to be leaders, you got to get out there. That's where decisions happen. That's where there's consequences. That's where people's lives are affected on whether or not you make one decision or another decision. So, just want to stress, I know that you named this for a reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the arena, that's where it happens.
It is. And I want to just, shout out to especially our students who might be listening that they're like, gosh, do I have enough experience? You will. And going back to our beginning today, it's a journey. We
Yes.
learn, we try, we fail, we grow, we pray, we study, we reflect. All those things equip us to be better leaders every day. And you've helped us to see that in action. So thanks, Pat, so much. I just want to remind our viewers and our listeners that we do have other programming coming up. You can check us out on the Brock Barnes Center for Leadership website, and you'll see other programs. We have Jonathan Ingram coming up on February the 2nd and Roger Pearson on February 11th. Pat, thanks so much for being here. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay.